it to the end.
In the beginning.
Yeah, I'll be your final Josh for the day. And I entitled my talk at the end, not just because I'm going at the end of the day, and not just because it's the end of my master's degree, though I expect I'll be learning my whole life. I think there's a lot left to learn and teach each other all the time. But is the projector turning on? So
Yeah, it just has one.
that's fine. It can take its time.
Okay.
Everything in its right time, I guess. I also want to talk about, it's a good follow-up from Josh's talk. I may be able to ground it slightly even. We talk about this idea of the end of the world. And you all may remember that this was something that the Earth community flirted with 5 months ago, on the winter solstice on December 21st, 2012. PCC, so good with what's ending and what's beginning and being aware of these transitions, did something really beautiful on that day. But whether you were one of the hundreds of thousands of people traveling to sacred sites in their area or just woke up that morning with just an inkling of a question of, what if this might be the end? It was an unprecedented and beautiful moment to really drop into some of what we've been talking about here today, and I've been really resonating and loving all the contributions. If I can bring up some pictures, I'll begin with a little some images from where we began on December 21st. PCC spiraled around the entire Bay Area, starting in the Oakland Hills. The most easterly, it was actually the location of the most recent, thank you, Didia. The most recent volcanic activity, 10 million years ago, was the park that we began our collective work. Cool. This is in the Oakland Hills. This is pre-dawn, December 21st. Climbing up to a hill where you could see all the way due east to the Sierra Nevadas, the first rays of light to hit the west coast, and the view also extended west across the whole bay, with the city, the Golden Gate, the big ocean beyond. And we gathered about 30 of us up on that little hillside, and we waited. And so what were we waiting for? Were we waiting for the end of the world? I think some of us were kind of rooting for it, but no, worlds don't end in a day. They don't end in big action movie explosions. And I think that some of you might agree that it's been a bit of an apocalyptic vibe recently. Yeah. Not just 2012, but going back to 2000, the more you sort of reckon all the unknowns ahead of us in the planet, whether or not you're buying into it being the end of the world or whatever you want to call it, the fact that there are so many unknowns, big unknowns, is a really important thing to reckon with. And I think it's also probably pretty crucial because, as Joanna Macy, who we've been referencing a lot today, said recently, if anybody tells you that they know what's going to happen, don't believe them. And that's right, because there's a lot of possibility open to us, as Josh was so beautifully saying. There's been apocalyptic cultures throughout history. If you have a civilization that considers itself emanating from somewhere and heading inexorably toward a destination in time, usually that destination in time, that endpoint, is a pretty dramatic vision, and there's been numerous examples over and over again of people sort of predicting the end of the world with different engagements. I think it appears that one way that we are distinguished from some of those is that we seem to be able to actually end life on the planet. Whether it's fast with something like nuclear warfare, or slowly, I'm going to be addressing scales as one of the themes of this talk. So Climate change, these kinds of shifts can appear slow to us going about our daily lives, but they're actually happening really fast, dramatically, shockingly fast. Regardless, this is a really unique position to suddenly be the dominant species on the planet and be able to affect change at this level, at this really sort of death cycle level. I'm about to get a degree technically in philosophy and religion with a concentration in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. And I have to admit that none of those words were what brought me across the country from New Jersey. What drew me here was the integral ecology track. We've heard a lot of beautiful expressions today, orosophy, imaginal ecology, and one of the first things I realized about what's happening on the planet right now is that you do need all these different avenues, all these different angles on the issue. There's no one field of study that's going to do it. There's no one job that you're going to get that's going to, it might be the perfect one for you at that time, but there's no way that one person in one situation is going to solve it. It needs all these different aspects to come in. So integral ecology does that in a very unique and beautiful way in that it's not just the environmental science, so I'll get a little bit into that. That'll be part of the grounding of we've been throwing around this term ecological crisis. I actually want to sort of open that up for a sec, because it's real, such as anything is real. But integral ecology, crucially to me, it includes questions of justice and questions of spirit. In terms of justice, I mean, I live in Northern California, and I have this body, and so I live one of the most comfortable lives on the planet, by far. There's billions of people without access to water, without access to food or shelter. There's a huge disproportion between my experience, and I live a simple life. I sell local honey at farmers markets. I mean, this is, I keep it chill, but nevertheless, I'm much, much wealthier and much, much easier in my way of life than a lot of people on the planet. So, there's another issue of these effects of pollution, the effects of climate change. They disproportionately affect people who had didn't have anything to do with the original polluting, the original troublemaking. And I think when you have this privilege, as we were talking about before, there's a responsibility that comes with it. And that's going to be more and more felt out by those of us who live on this side of the planet, where we're pretty relaxed here, but things are shifting, and it will come here as well sooner or later in different ways. It's going to be different everywhere how this plays out. So in terms of spirit, these are not, as we've mentioned, just inanimate, dead objects that we're messing around with. These are actually living beings with souls that we can have relationships with. The important part of this nature, this relationship with spirituality, to me, is that it's imminent, it's close at hand. These are ways, as Laura was saying, where you can go out in your local natural spaces and have a deep, deep connection with the divine, deep, deep connection with what's happening on all these levels of consciousness. And we take that really seriously. We built a whole program around that here, which is huge. It's a huge deal, and I expect it'll grow, but it's very unique. What integral ecology gets around to, it's been a blast kind of explaining what integral ecology is over the last 3 years, because nobody's ever heard of it. And the way I describe it is it's about relationships with the earth. And that can happen on a whole bunch of different scales. So like local food, which I've been involved with almost the whole last decade. Also something as wide as climate migrants. There's hundreds of thousands of people displaced from their homes right now because their topsoil is eroding, or there's war erupting because of lack of resources to water. There's all these different situations that integral ecology specifically allows a really important framework in, if your water is dwindling and the only water that's available is with your neighbor that you've been having religious wars with over generations, how do you reckon? These are sacred rivers, a lot of them, and they're flooding and flooding and flooding and then drying up. So what this seems to center around, regardless of the scale, is home. And ecology has the root, the Greek root oikos, which is the same as economics, and it's about relationships with home. And for me, that comes close to my home here. Look, this is the river system that's tattooed on my back. This is where I was born, the confluence of the Wampawag and the Matawan, which are not the names that they use anymore, but that's what they were originally called. And this is the first place that I discovered ecology, on the lake and in my parents' garden. My mom's here today. Isn't? And we also, during my time at PCC, I guess 2 years ago now, moved all of our family's stuff out of that house. So these, very sort of old stories, we opened them up, sort of saw where they were at, and kind of did our best to close them out as best as we could. That was not an easy task. It had a lot of different kinds of incarnations. Some of them were people like this, some of them were awesome mustached people like that. And we did our best to really take the time to sort of move through ritual, through storytelling, through really being present to the shift. That's not something that is available to a lot of people. A lot of these displaced climate migrants who I just mentioned, who are growing in number all the time. Some of them have to leave very quickly, some of them have to leave under duress. I think it's a huge issue. And it goes around home. So to get sort of deeper into the specifically ecological aspects of this, because that's why I came here. I have some background in the arts, in politics and philosophy, just because of who my parents were. But I didn't have a lot of ecological knowledge. And then what happens is when you come here and you study the state of the planet, it's appalling. It's shocking, it's dire, it's urgent, it's really, really serious. I think we're gonna have to invent new words and new language to explain what's happening, because I can't, it's hard for me to express it. Just this week, within the last week, there was we passed 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The last time that was at that level was 4 million years ago. The other study that came out last week was that climate change is going to threaten over half of all plant species and over a third of all animal species, and those were conservative estimates. So, when will this become a story for us? When will it be a story that you tell? I have a poem, but because we're sort of getting to the end, well...
No, do it.
All right. It's got language in it, though. You guys can handle it?
We'll roll. We'll roll.
When, do you think we're fucked? Knowing what you know of storms the size of hemispheres, of whole rainforests on fire, of mile-wide methane burps in the Arctic, all our arsenal amassing neighbors who'd rather kill and fear than give up false freedoms, when will you think that we're fucked? That's a poem I wrote in this class. And And so it raises the question, is fucked a good way of thinking about this? Is it helpful? Does it open up possibility? Who gets to decide when it's too late? Who, you know, if there's one blade of grass left alive on the planet, would you say, no, you're not deserved of all the sun and water that you could get? You should give up, it's too late. We may get to this point, because it's not just the topsoil that's eroding and the aquifers that are dwindling and the whole places and species that we're destroying. It's actually that because it's an interconnected web of life, all these systems are very, potentially fragile and prone to shifting with each other. So there's tipping points. To the best of our knowledge, there are tipping points that we're within a decade of passing. Once a certain amount of ice melts, then the whole ice sheet melts. Once you sort of shift enough of this temperature in this part of the world, then the whole Gulf Stream shifts. There's all these things that sort of take over. And my figure is by 2020, all our lives will pretty much be about this. Will be about the healthy relationship of the planet. It's going to have to be. As we get further past some of these tipping points, possibilities close. Also possibilities open, as Josh was talking about. What I think is helpful is knowing the history of regenerative cataclysm in the universe. There's all these moments where I have a video of a workshop that I did it was a workshop on people who want to go to war to save the world, and trying to open up this sense of cataclysm. I had everybody get up and act out the Mars-sized planet Theia crashing into the primordial Earth, which is what they believe created the moon. And that's a pretty dramatic, intense thing, lava extending out into space and huge explosions. But that's what gave us the moon, the tides, all the sort of ways of life that we understand now. There's all these examples of time in the universe that you have all the ingredients of something, but then it shifts over into something else you can't know yet. So knowing that there are these aspects of ways of life that we've known our whole time on this planet that are ending in this generation, the period, 65 million years of the Cenozoic, which is the time since the last mass extinction, the Holocene, which is a period of 12,000 years of stable climate since the last ice age. Even something that we take for granted like cheap oil is only 120 years. Lighting electricity at night is 130 years old. These are pretty things that we understand to be everything that are shifting. And just to go back to the rest of 2012, and then I'll have a quick song to close out. We spiraled around the whole bay, and what was important about this was honoring, this is Kat, welcoming the first sunrise. And this is if I move this over, a rainbow that appeared at first light, right where we were, right over the Golden Gate Bridge. And we visited elders like Joanna Macy for breakfast. We visited elders like the redwood groves up on Mount Tam. And we caught the last sunset. And really, it was about, not sort of pretending like the world was ending right there, but paying attention to what was ending in our lives, what was beginning, and honoring the magical, beautiful space that we have, and also that we can do this together, that right now we have a creative community that is compassionate and excited about being creative together, and you can get through just about anything with that. So in that spirit, I need some help with this song. Can somebody give me an F sharp? Oh, there's one. I might need that again. Oh, look. Thanks. There's a drum. If anybody else wants to get the drum from over in that room, it looked like we practiced it. Oh, thank you. This is a song called Until. Yeah, I guess, let's see, right here. Thanks, guys. So you need your friends. So you need creative expression. Yeah, ready? Maybe that glockenspiel. I need the other. Oh, you love it. Anyone else is allowed to shuffle their feet as well.
I expect it all to go today. Something big is finally giving way to the birds. Portend a quake. What do they intend to take? Could this be the decisive storm? Last hours in this itchy uniform. So until the shit gets real, I will push whatever button lets me feel. So until the shit gets real, I will push whatever button lets me feel. So until, hey, you wanna play pretend? Fantasize about violent ends. Follow the evacuation route. I'll share my water. Ready? Share my water. Please don't shoot. Here's some help to protect the source. Our future thirst. So until the shit gets real, I will push whatever button lets me feel. So until the shit gets real, I will push whatever button lets me feel. So until the shit gets real. Lets me feel so.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.